Good evening and welcome to tonight's program, a special in-person edition of the American LGBTQ Museum's book club, the Lavender Literary Society, featuring Nico Lang's American Teenager with special guest Raquel Willis. My name is Suhaili Bautista Carolina. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Director of Public Programs and Partnerships at the American LGBTQ Museum, a new collaboration dedicated to preserving, researching, and sharing LGBTQ history and culture that will open its first physical galleries right here in New York in 2027. At the museum, we like to say that you don't have to wait until 2027 to experience the queer magic of the museum. We're already producing and presenting dynamic public programming, such as the one you are attending this evening, as well as award-winning traveling exhibitions centered on LGBTQ history and culture. I encourage you to follow us on social media if you haven't already, become a founding member, continue to attend our programming, tell a friend, and stay engaged as our story continues to unfold. If you are here tonight, then you understand the incredible power and influence of books. We started the Lavender Literary Society Book Club because we understood that the rich stories of LGBTQ people, whether in fiction, whether in memoir, graphic novel, or historical narrative, are at severe risk of, or in many cases already experiencing, erasure and censorship. These are stories that need to be told, shared, passed on, and protected in order for them to survive. That is in part what we are gathered in community to be a part of this evening, the critical preservation and bold, daring amplification of our queer stories. So when someone asks you what you did tonight, I hope that instead of saying, oh, I went to this American LGBTQ Museum Book Club program, you'll say, I'm supporting the vision for a museum that will help preserve, archive, and present queer stories. That's powerful stuff. I'd like to express our deepest gratitude to our friends at the Center for Fiction for hosting us this evening. Cafe is open. Bathrooms are located just outside of the door at the back of the children's section. And we're really hoping that if you have any access needs, you can contact or be in touch with any of the staff members that are seated in the back so that we can figure out how to best support you. It's now my pleasure to introduce our friends and this evening's speakers. Nico Lang, they, them, is a non-binary award-winning journalist with over a decade of experience covering the transgender community's fight for equality. Their work has appeared in too many major publications to name, so I'm going to spare them here, but they are also the author of this evening's book, American Teenager. Raquel Willis is a badass activist, public speaker, journalist, who has over a decade of experience and uses their powerful voice to shed a light on the unique struggles faced by trans women of color. There's so much more to say about each of them, but I'll let them do the talking this evening. Enjoy the program. I'd like to introduce Raquel and Nico to the stage.
Nico, it is an honor to be in conversation with you tonight. This is a necessary read for everyone to understand the experiences of our young trans folks and community. And I know that the title talks about a turbulent era. I think people often think that that era ends and stops with an election or something like that, but we know that our folks have been through it for quite a while. So unfortunately, the turbulent era continues. Right off the bat, I want to name, I'm sure in this room there's a lot of weight and heaviness. Obviously there's joy and there's fabulousness and ferociousness whenever our people can get together. And as Nico and I were making our way here, we heard about yet another executive order from the Trump administration, specifically targeting access to healthcare for trans youth under the age of 19. So just want to name that off the top that we're holding that with y'all. But I think that grounds us in the importance of your work. So I want to start off and just give you some space and to just talk about how it feels to do this work and know the importance of this work, and also have it continue to land in this continuous turbulent era.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of hope that this book would be like totally irrelevant after the election. Like, my hope is always to put myself out of a job, and somehow I keep never doing that. Like, I genuinely believed, because I'm super naive, that in like 2016, that like Hillary was gonna win, and then I would like never work again, and I was like, I'll have to find something else to do. It's gonna be great, but that hasn't happened yet. So I really hope to not have to do this, because it's a lovely thing to get to do. Like, I'm so blessed to know these families and to have these connections with folks, because it's like, I mean, for folks who have read the book, I think you can probably tell, like, these people are like my family now, and I'm so blessed that they're a part of my life, but like, none of us should have had to do this. And I think this is something that the kids and I acknowledged a lot, because I spent 2.5 weeks with each family, right? That, at the end of the day, they shouldn't have had to have a journalist spend 2.5 weeks with them to beg other people to treat them like human beings, right? Like, a book like this should never have had to exist. So I'm so grateful that I get to do this, but I think I write with the hope that one day books like this will no longer be needed, that we can have lots of like beautiful trans stories, but the kinds of things that this book deals with and the oppression that these kids are experiencing right now, particularly in the current moment, are just a very distant memory. Like, I hope it's like, reading like The Jungle, right? And you can be like, oh, isn't that wild? That's the way things were then. Like, I deeply hope that this book is a period piece sooner rather than later. That's like my greatest wish.
And just for a little more background, if you haven't read American Teenager yet, as Nico said, they spent a year traveling the United States, documenting the lives of trans, non-binary, and gender fluid teens and their families. So, I mean, you were in the house.
Mm-hmm. So I had roommates, basically.
You had roommates. So I'm curious about that aspect of it, because you've been a reporter for years, but I wonder if this is like the most immersed in a subject's life that you've been.
Yeah, because I work for publications that generally don't have a lot of money. So I'm used to having to do things very much on the fly. Like, staying with like random friends of friends on like some guy's couch, and I don't even really know his name. It's like Bob or something, right? So I'm used to like having to make do, but I haven't really been in close proximity with my subjects like that. Generally, I keep a certain amount of distance because I feel like that's necessary, right? That you should be able to, at the end of the day, as a reporter, kind of put it away and just, have like a nice moment. If I want to watch The Traitors, I should just be able to do that in peace. Which, if you're not watching The Traitors, watch The Traitors. It's great. Basically, like The Traitors and Heidi Montag's album are pretty much like keeping me sane right now. So thanks, guys. I was actually inspired to sort of like break down those barriers by, this is an odd reference, but has anyone seen the movie Blue Valentine with Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams? Hiring film, don't watch it. But it's very good, but no, the world is too much right now, so don't do that to yourself. The crew and the cast, when they made it, they talked about the fact that they lived together for like 3 months because it built a certain amount of intimacy that they felt like you just couldn't fake. And I was thinking about that when I wrote this book, when I was conceiving of this book, because I was like, well, if I really want to know what these folks are like, I've got to really see them in their space, and I've got to see them in their space as much as I can. Because I feel like sometimes that we put on a good face for other people, right? Because we always want others to see us in the best light. There's this essay by Irving Goffman where he talks about the front stage and the backstage. And the front stage of ourselves is like all the stuff that we show to other people. It's like when our hair's done and we're presented, it's like when we're like dressed to the nines. And then the backstage is all that stuff that you don't want to show other people. And for a book like this to feel really real and raw and vulnerable and truthful, I knew that I would have to see those backstage moments. And I knew that the only way to really do that was to like see these folks in their element. Like to see them when they are like, getting up like, in the morning and they haven't had their coffee yet. And maybe they're like a little crabby, right? It's not like I put every single crabby moment in the book or something, but I just wanted to know these folks as really authentic humans. There's a great documentary called oh my God, why am I blanking? I have this thing where I can name every actor from a movie, but you're like, what's the name of your favorite movie? And I'm like, I've got one, it's pretty good. Grey Gardens, that is the name of it. It's a great documentary by the Maisels brothers. See, I can tell you the directors, where they follow around these two recluses, the Beals, as they sort of just like go about their daily lives. And there's this incredible intimacy there because they spent so much time with each other. They were in such close proximity. And you can sense that relationship too. And for readers, like I really wanted to get, like for them to get a sense of my relationship to these subjects. Because I don't think that these things are like as objective as we make them out to be. And I wanted to make it clear that I was a very subjective observer here. Like I was interacting with them, they were interacting with me, like we built a relationship. Like I grew like real like feelings and like love for these folks. And all of that just becomes part of the story. And I know that was a more complicated answer than you expected. But this is just how I talk, I'm so sorry. I will not change. One lady at an event was just like, you talk too fast. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, that's how I talk. I will try to change, but it hasn't changed in 37 years. So.
Yeah, see, I'm Southern, so I think with my draw, like we're at a normal pace. So, like you said, I mean, you delved into the lives of 8 teens. There's Wyatt, Ridian, Micah, Clint, Ruby, Augie, Jack, and Kylie. And I want to jump to Kylie because I feel like Kylie had not a perfect life, right? But I think to this point around the front stage and the backstage, in the, I guess, front stage, there's this appearance that like everything is in order for her. And Kylie lives in California, has an affirming family. There are moments, of course, that I think you sprinkle in there with local fights, right, that are starting to percolate around bans or curricula bans, concerns like that. There was an interesting moment where the pride was up for consideration, like not having it anymore for some folks who were in the environment. But with Kylie, what stuck out to me was just how effervescent you painted her. And she talked about, you know, her biggest worries was not being a flop.
I mean, for whom is that?
Right. Not getting into college. She talked about her life plan becoming to be a sexy, young-looking entrepreneur with beautiful hair and a 10-digit net worth. She just had so much charisma, uniqueness, nerve. But, you know, I think about kind of all of the ingredients that made up her life. And it seemed like ending on her story was kind of like a hope of like, this is a bit closer to trans teens, just having a regular life and being able to worry about more of the typical things that other teenagers worry about. Can you talk a little bit more about that and kind of the decision to, I guess, have this, well, I guess it's chronological, right? So
yeah.
As you kind of had these experiences with these families and lived with them. But I wonder how you think about the placement of her story at the end of the book.
Yeah, there's this philosopher, Schopenhauer, who says that sometimes you can sort of look at the arc of your life and it's like guided as if like by an invisible hand. That like all of these sort of like random moments that seem just like sporadic and like there wasn't a plan, that sort of a plan reveals itself. And with this book, it sounds like a hippy dippy, and it is hippy dippy, but it's kind of awesome. And you know, with this book, I really felt that like invisible hand all over the book in terms of that there were so many things that I didn't plan for, that wasn't sort of like something I had in my mind, that just worked out really beautifully. And one of those things was Kylie being last, because there was something that I felt so aspirational about her life. And it's not that, you know, she lives in California, right? And she's this very like, she's got everything she wants. She's a very like spoiled, like in a perfectly like good way, 17-year-old girl who like has an iPhone. She has like, you know, like when she gets a car one day, when she finally learns how to drive, you know, her parents will help her. Like she's got everything, right? She has privilege, as we say. But I think in that, what I saw in Kylie is that she's able to access something that a lot of kids don't get, that she's like kind of like blissfully imperfect. Because so many of the young people that I worked with really put like a great burden on themselves all the time to be perfect and to always like say the right thing and do the right thing, because it feels like if you screw up or you say the like one bad thing that you might ruin it for everybody. And these kids like really internalize that at such a young age. And they're doing all this incredible advocacy work and this activism. They're organizing marches and they're creating nonprofits and really doing the work at like 15 years old. And I think that that's lovely and we're all in debt to them, but it should also be a choice. And I think at the other end of that spectrum, you've got somebody like Kylie who's just so like blissfully not in tune with any of these things. She doesn't know about any of the anti-trans laws that are happening. She doesn't really want to know. She just wants to live her life. And she does it so like unapologetically and in a way that's so true to her. Like I know you're not supposed to read Goodreads, and I swear that I don't, except that I maybe do like 10 times a day. Who can say? No, really. But mostly because I find the reactions to this book really fascinating. And because I think a couple commenters that said that they found a couple of the kids unlikable. And I know that means they must be talking about like Kylie and Clint, probably. And to me, I find that fascinating because I think that Kylie gets something that most kids don't get, that she gets to be authentically teenagery, that she feels like a teenager in the way that I was a teenager, and that I was a little like tyrant hellion. Like I like think of like my parents putting up with me and I feel bad for them. I was annoying, right? And like all teens should get the ability to be like bratty and messy and annoying, but like most kids don't get that because they just have to be perfect. And you have this girl who's just so, like I compare it to like the Charlie XCX definition of brat, in that she's just this like girl who does what she wants all the time. She lives life on her own terms. And I feel like that's what these kids are really fighting for, right? Like I thought so much about while writing the book about the marriage equality movement, and you know that there was this time in American life where like the queer movement was trying to convince straight people that we deserved rights because we were the same as them. And while writing the book, I realized that I don't think that's what I've ever been fighting for, and I don't think that's what these kids are fighting for either. Like they're fighting for the right to live their own self-determined lives. And it's like, I think that's what I'm fighting for too. It's like, I should get to be me because me deserves rights. And I should get to then like have whatever kind of life that I want. And my rights don't get to be taken away just because some other people disapprove of it. And it's the same with these kids. If they're perfect, you know, and say everything right all the time, that's great. If they're like a little Charlie XCX, I think that that's awesome. And I love that this book makes space for all of that because it is authentic. Like I let these kids just be totally themselves and not like say sorry for it. And I know that I sense that people might find that jarring to see like, you know, the kids really like speak their truth, but we need to hear what these kids have to say. We need to hear them like unvarnished and fully able to express themselves. I think if we're able to get out of this moment ever, we need to finally learn from them. They have so much to teach us. They really shouldn't have to teach us, but clearly we need a lot of learning.
I really felt that it's interesting that those folks were like, you know, Clint and Kylie were unlikable because I found their stories to be the most interesting. You know, it almost felt like maybe those readers are just simply accustomed to this idea of trans youth constantly, you know, in a victim mode or constantly having to be beholden to this like burden of maturity and having to be the advocate, and they're just like, I'm just trying to live my life and chase these dreams. So I appreciate that insight. That makes me think about Augie and kind of the dynamic between Augie and Jack. There's one moment between these siblings. Jack is older and is a trans woman, and Augie is non-binary. And there's a moment where you talk about Jack having said that Augie is mature beyond their years, But I was also curious about kind of the dynamic between them and what it was like for you to kind of witness that, right? This kind of dissection of maybe the standards that are kind of put out there for trans folks, and if you don't kind of fit these ideas around passability or trying to be what's considered more binary, it can make it difficult. And I think that was something that Augie really fleshed out in the narrative. Can you talk a little bit more about their dynamic?
Jack is a 19-year-old trans girl, and Augie is her younger sibling, non-binary and 16. And they live in Pensacola, Florida, with their mom, who we call June in the book, who was going through a lot. You know, the family in general is going through a lot. June is a domestic violence survivor, and she experiences complex PTSD. And they had recently been homeless. They were unhoused for a period of 3 months while they looked for a new place to live. They were kicked out by June's former partner. And then on top of that, Jack was sort of dealing with the scars of her forced detransition. She was one of the kids who lost her Medicaid coverage under Florida's gender-affirming care ban. Sorry, I always cry when I talk about this, and I'm so sick of crying. Crying's like great, and I affirm, but I feel like Ariana Grande on the Wicked tour. I am tired of crying, girl. When I was in Cincinnati, because it's where I'm from, we clocked it. I cried 8 times that night, so we started counting. You know, Jack, for a period of, I say it in the book, I think it was 5 months, she didn't have access to the hormones that had helped her be more herself. And it was a tremendously difficult period. She didn't leave her room. She got so skinny that her mom was afraid that her heart would stop in her sleep. So she would sit beside her every night when her daughter went to sleep. So when I was there, it was really difficult to be there with them, because I think sometimes you can really feel when someone's gone through something, right? You can sort of like feel that pain like an external heartbeat. And that was just so apparent in the house with us all the time, like that trauma. So we were all, I think, the 4 of us just really navigating that all the time. And at first when I got there, I wasn't sure that I would be able to do it. Like I didn't know if we would all be able to work together, because they'd been through so much and they were just clearly experiencing this pain in the present. And I was like, I don't know, are they in the place for this? I don't know if this is gonna work, but I'm really glad that it did, because I felt like we were able to tap into some things that I've never seen represented before. With the book, you know, people always ask like how I chose the families, and I really gravitated towards stories that I'd never heard before. Because as an author, I mean, selfishly, I just don't want to write a story that's already been written, but also, you know, my friend Jen Richards says that every problem of trans representation is answered by more, right? So with this book, I wanted to give people more. Like I wanted to go deeper, and I wanted to represent things that I'd never seen and that I felt like people needed to see. And, you know, I say that because what you were talking about with Augie, you know, I'm really glad that we got to include this, and I'm really glad that you asked about it, because Augie said something that I'd never really seen in literature before or in like journalism, that as a non-binary person, I'm also non-binary, there's no clear way for them to pass, right? Because there's no like set standard of what being non-binary looks like. And a lot of people don't really know what a non-binary person is. I think, you know, public understanding of trans folks has come a long way, but like there's still a lot of educating to do, right? So when Augie goes out into the world and just, you know, exists as themselves, they're constantly being misgendered. They're never gendered correctly, right? They're always like, you know, like if they go to the grocery store with Jack, it's always like, good night, ladies, you know, that sort of thing. And it's really tough because you want to sort of present yourself the way that you want others to see you, but Augie's already doing that and people aren't getting it right. So it's just like, what do you do? And that was, you know, it's a really tough thing for Augie to get to navigate, but I think there's such beauty in sharing that with all of us, because it was something that I just felt like as a non-binary person who doesn't really do, I don't know, I'm like a very lazy non-binary person. Like I just have the same clothes that I've had for like 20 years. I'm not changing my wardrobe now, you know? I'm like, it's so hard to find these clothes that fit me. I'm not getting new ones, no. So I felt really seen in that, because I think I needed somebody to sort of give me permission to be myself. I needed someone to say like, it's okay for you to be non-binary, whatever way you are, because I'm non-binary, whatever way I am, and I go through the same things that you do, because I'm never like gendered correctly. Like my friends are really great, and my like family, like they try. My grandparents are really cool, but like gender neutral pronouns. Ugh. My grandpa would like once looked at me and was like, "You're into gender, right?" And I was like, "That is one way to describe me." But you know what? He voted for Kamala this time, so we're good. He used to be historically a Republican and has never voted. He has now voted for 3 Democratic presidents in a row. And I looked at him recently. I was like, "So Pops, you're just like basically a Democrat right now, right?" And he was like, "Yeah, I guess." And I was like, "Okay, cool. That's good." So you're welcome, everyone. I've been working on that for a long time. Yeah, with that, I really wanted this book to create space for people, and not just to sort of like create a space I needed, but to be the space they needed. Like I never decided for these kids what their story was going to be. Like at the beginning of when I went there, for the first couple days, we would essentially all sit together and we would decide, what chapter are we writing here? What story is it important for you to tell? And I was thinking about this before and I hadn't really connected the dots, but I was an op-ed editor for 2 years. I think some folks in the audience were actually like people that wrote op-eds with me, right? And with that, you're really helping somebody express their voice. It's about, what do they want to say? What message do they want to get out in the world? And I really treated this like that with every chapter, it was about like giving the kids a spotlight to express something that felt really important to them. I was never trying to push a narrative on them. And I was never trying to decide what the story was. So I was just really grateful that Augie decided that that's what was important for them to express, because I think a lot of people need to hear it. Like I know I do.
So I'm gonna do one more question and then we'll open it up for Q&A. So.
Do we want a reading? I've got a book right here.
Oh yes, you are supposed to do a reading.
I am. I can do that before the.
Yeah, so if you want to think on your questions, we'll do that.
Okay.
I
was going to do Clint because you liked it so much.
I love Clint's story. Okay, perfect.
So, all Clint wants really is to continue having the freedom to maintain that maverick spirit, to be the kid who watches deep sea documentaries in his free time, loves trivia about ancient Egypt, and can effuse endlessly about trees. He sometimes thinks about a gaffe from former Utah Senator Mitt Romney during his 2012 presidential run, wherein he praised Michigan trees as the quote-unquote right height. Although the remarks baffled journalists at the time, Clint knows what he means. Trees are different in different places, the boy asserts. Illinois trees look like Illinois trees. I drive 6 hours and it's a huge difference. Sitting on his mother's patio the day after Eid, I asked Clint if he has a favorite tree, and after chiding the line of inquiry as a loaded question, he really did. He recalls seeing a twisted gray shrub during a trip to Biscayne Bay in Florida. The ancient tree was short and wrinkly, measuring about 6 or 7 feet in height, and it had been destroyed in its attempt to weather the passage of time. The way the world looks must have been so different when that tree was there, Clint had thought to himself. The park that I was in, the glaciers, must have just been so much more dramatic. The animals that were around there, the native people, will never know exactly what it looked like. Despite his participation in this book, Clint hasn't changed his mind regarding his relationship to transness, still believing that his independence means some necessary distancing from his identity. At a recent Human Rights Campaign dinner, Clint told Maha, his mother, something that he'd never let himself express, that he was grateful for everything that she had done for him and for other kids like him. But as significant as that milestone was, he has remained unmoved. Preferring to walk alone, to find his own way through the wilderness, he still doesn't identify with her need to find a community who understands and shares her experiences. He doesn't need to be loud and proud when he already knows that Allah is so much bigger than all this. Sorry, burp. So gross. The Muslim divinity is not depicted as either male or female in the Quran, thought instead to have no gender at all. When I think about God, it's just a blinding light, Clint says. It's not a dude in the skies. God's not a man. We don't have depictions of gods or prophets, so every painting you see of Muhammad is just a cloud. As my time with Clint draws to a close, I'm left wondering why someone so resolute in his own solitude would agree to spend the end of his high school journey documenting his story with a journalist. Prom is in 2 weeks and graduation not long after, and I'm occupying valuable real estate in his young life by keeping him from the classmates he may only see after this on social media, not to mention the best friend who he has yet to convince to attend his same chosen college. As a pair of birds squabble somewhere in the unseen distance, he says that it was important for him to tell other kids his age that being transgender doesn't have to define them or be the most important part of their life, that it can be just one small aspect of the messiness that makes them human. He says that after today, he never plans to engage in any form of LGBTQI+ advocacy ever again. Being trans is not a part of my identity, he says. My Muslim friends, that's a group where I talk about things that culturally nobody else understands. I feel like that's a bigger part of my personality. Really, I'm just some boring dude with not a lot going on. I hope people think I wasted my life reading this chapter. And as soon as he said that, I was like, thank you, Clint, that's how your chapter's gonna end.
That was baller.
He's just so cool. So cool that he does not respond to my text messages. If you were wondering which kids don't respond to me, it's exactly who you could guess. It's Clint and Kylie. I talk to their moms all the time, but no, they're like, having fun, I guess.
I love it. Okay, how are we feeling about questions? Any hands?
I'm a mom. I've got an almost teenage daughter, and I have lots of friends who are actually texting me tonight as you may be receiving texts saying, I've been in politics and activism most of my career. What does this mean for my family? What does this mean? My child is scared. We're scared. And I'm sure the experience of having lived alongside so many different families has so many different ways to approach this. But I'm getting into the weeds saying, well, this will be battled at every state level. You have time. You live in Colorado. You live in California. I mean, very much the same battles that you see on reproductive rights and access. But what advice do you have? Even I'm dealing with the parents, friends of mine, not the kids. And so you want to be honest. You say, get on Signal, first of all, get off text. Just any advice you have being in the trenches on this issue. And I'm sorry to unload so much on you, but literally as we all came here tonight.
Anytime I want to give advice to somebody, I will literally ask them, is it okay if I give you advice? Do you need this? And if they say no, I'm like, all right, I will shut up and mind my business, right? So as much as I spent so much time with these families and they're such a part of my lives now, the truth is I don't know a damn thing about what they're going through still. I don't, live it. I got to spend 2.5 weeks with them. And, it was tough for all of us. I had vicarious trauma for months afterward. I felt horrible one day and I was like, I should probably go to the doctor and get this checked out. And I was like, Doc, I just feel terrible. What's wrong with me? And, he did a little checkup and he's like, well, there's a very clear answer for this. Your blood pressure is 160/100. That's bad. For those who aren't aware, and if you're not aware, good for you. That's like getting a D in blood pressure. So they legally were not allowed to let me leave until my blood pressure went down. I'm now on medication twice a day. It's great, actually. Beta blockers, strongly recommend them. If I could have a t-shirt that says I heart beta blockers, I would. Print it for me, girl. But, with that, I always think about the effect that all this must be having on their bodies. Because I got to leave. I got to go home. They don't get to do that. They're in this fight all the time, whether they want to be or not. I get to choose to engage. I live in LA with my husband. I'm an adult. I'm not a young person that needs gender affirming care. So I will never really know. But I think the thing that I've seen time and again is the importance of community and the importance of love. That's one of the reasons that love is so central to this book in a lot of different forms. I loved Augie and Jack's story because it's about sibling love. The way that two siblings can be such a support for one another, even when they don't always have their parents to do that. I have that with my middle brother. I have 2 brothers, one of whom we're praying for. And the other one who's my sweet angel, perfect baby. And he's my favorite person in the world. And I'm so grateful to have him in my life. And that love is so important to me. So to be able to celebrate that felt really cool. So you see that, you see parental love, you see friend love, you see community love, you see the love of a church, like how important it is to have like an affirming church. So for those folks, I would just say, hold each other closer right now. Like I really think the thing that gets us through all this is each other. And it'll take a lot to survive the next 4 years. It's been horrible. Like I keep saying that I feel like we need a word that means like terrible, but also fine. It definitely exists in German, not quite in English. Yeah, we'll get there. But I think for all those folks who are also not doing great right now, we just have to show up for each other and support each other, right? So for those families, I would just say like go wherever the love is. Like if you have that in your family, listen to that. If you need like those ride or die friends to like be next to you right now, like seek them out, have like a girls' night, like turn off your phone for a while and just forget about this. I've become a deeply silly person because of like the Trump administration. Because I realized the first time around, because all 4 years, I barely got a day off. Like you can ask my husband. Like I worked nights, I worked weekends, I did not because I couldn't take a break. Every time I would decide to have a nice day, like, I don't know, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg would die. It just like, there was so much going on in the world all the time that it never let up. And I learned through that the only way I could survive was by like carving out joy any way that I could, and learning how to sort of like create silliness for myself. Like I got really into screwball comedies because it's just like, they're so stupid, but amazing. And I like now watch The Real Housewives. I used to make fun of that show. I was very wrong. I'm so sorry. Like Real Housewives of Salt Lake City is my mental health. Oh my God. Do we have any like Mary Cosby fans in the house? Yeah. Okay. Icon, queen, legend. We stand. Not to belabor that too long. But I think, like finding those ways just to create joy for yourself or create those things that will help you survive this is so critical. Like if we don't come in with a mental health plan, frankly, or like a survival plan for ourselves, this is gonna be a really hard 4 years and it's already next to impossible, right? So we just have to get through it any way that we can.
Yeah, thank you, Nico.
And also, it's okay to be shitty sometimes, right? Like, I feel like we all have to like put on a brave face and be like, oh, I'm doing, the world's terrible, but look at me, I'm doing great. It's okay to just be awful. I'm trying to normalize telling people I'm awful right now, but like say it with a smile, right? Because, then it sort of changes their like the delivery. And I just think that's okay. It's okay to just be bad. Like if the world is bad, like we're allowed to feel shitty about it. So I think that's okay.
Yeah.
That's all the advice. I'm not foisting any advice on people anymore.
What advice would you have to give to someone who's also writing nonfiction or writing books that are about topics that are really difficult and very much not fictional, things that have repercussions in the real world, even if your book is being published, 2 years after you're sitting down to write it?
I've been negged so often in my career. Like, someone will know who this is about, and I'm so sorry in advance. But I used to have this editor who would tell me like just really crappy things about myself all the time, but really casually, Like one day we were looking for a writer to do a cover story for our publication, and I just started there. I was like 2 weeks in. And I really didn't want to do it. But I thought he wanted me to do it and he didn't know how to ask. So, and I'm very like, I hate people talking in circles. So I just jumped in. I was like, oh, if you want me to do the cover story, I'm glad to do it, right? And he was like, oh, no, that's not what I meant. I was really looking for like one of those like A-list writer types to write it, And I convinced myself that I was like, that's not what he meant. I must be crazy.
Yes, it was.
It was, because a couple weeks later, we were looking for a writer for the publication, just a new writer because we had an opening. And I suggested a really close friend of mine because I just love her so much and I think the world of her and I knew that she needed money. And he said that he wouldn't ask her to do that because he thinks too highly of her work and she thought she was too good for it. I had done that work for 6 months, 3 days a week, and he asked me. He literally reached out to me to like ask if I wanted to do it. Yeah. So I was like, wow, was I not too good for it? Did you not think I was too good a writer? And it's like, you know, those are like small things that seem to not mean anything, right? It's just like silly offhanded comments from someone you don't even respect. But like those sort of things add up throughout the course of your career. Like as a writer and as a journalist, especially as a queer journalist, because we're always like fighting for our own opportunities, you really internalize that. So I didn't think that I could write a book or that anybody would ever let me do it. So it took my agents reaching out to me to give me that opportunity and to say that they thought that I could write a book that was worthy and that had value to do it. So I think there are two things there. One, find an agent. That's really important. Two, don't let those like, this is so cliche, but it's true. Don't let those naysayers get you down. Like you get so much advice as a journalist all the time, which is why I'm so advice shy. And even in the process of pitching this book, we like terrible feedbacks from some of the publishers. One publisher that I won't say the name of, Macmillan, said that the book wasn't realistic because none of the families rejected their kids. And it's really good I was not in that meeting because I was once voted most confrontational. Because I would have been like, well, F you very much. But luckily I was not. But I trusted myself. Like I knew that this story was important. I knew stories about parents that maybe aren't perfect, but are trying to like affirm their kids, that are doing the work. That felt so much more important to me than another story about rejection, because I'd heard that before. Every queer person has heard that before. These kids have heard that before. Some of them, you know, live it, right? Like I know what rejection is from my own life. I don't need to see another story like this. I needed to see this book. So I just I kept focused on the story that I wanted to tell, the story that I knew needed to be in the world. I'm gonna embarrass him because he's in the audience. He's very tall, it freaks me out. But my editor, Zach, trusted me. Throughout the process, he trusted me to know what the story was and the story I wanted to tell. And every single one of his notes was either in the service of that story, or if it was sort of maybe like a field of like my vision and what I wanted, he always deferred to me. There was never like any moment where he like pulled rank. I was like, no, we're gonna do this because I'm the editor and like I'm the boss. It was always about like listening to me and my voice. And I've very rarely experienced that. Like I can count on one hand the number of people who have ever done that for me in my career. And it really means a lot. It's 2 times.
Thank you, Zach.
So thank you. And so much this game is just about like access and gatekeeping. So finding those like folks who can open those doors for you is really, really, really important. And I would just say, like, again, I just want to stress the importance of not like giving up on your dream. Like during the pandemic, that like boss that I mentioned before, I got so sick of him that I decided that I was going to go to law school. I was going to pay $250,000 to get a law degree just to get away from this man. Which I tell you, that is a new way to hate your boss. You know what I mean? Have you $250,000 hated your bosses? I think not. So I went to Canada for 3 months because a bunch of my family lives there, and I just needed somewhere super boring to like study for the LSATs because it's super boring. It's like the worst thing in the world. And I was there and I was just having a really terrible time. Like I really hated this, and Radiohead had just re-released Kid A, and I was having so much more fun listening to that than I was like trying to go to law school. And one day I was desperate for advice, desperate. So I went to the town psychic in Canada. I paid him $60 for the pleasure of his services. He was wearing a Hollister t-shirt and a puka shell necklace. And I kept telling him throughout the thing, you know, it's like, I feel like I'm at this like fork in the road, or this crossroads. I'm really bad at idioms, whichever one is correct. Where I can either go to law school, and I sort of expressed like that I wasn't having a very good time, and I just didn't know if I really wanted to do this. And it seems like none of my friends who were lawyers really liked it all that much. If you were a lawyer and you love it, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. Or I could write this book, and I explained what the book was, and that you know what I wanted to achieve. And you know, he laid out my cards and he looked at everything, and at the end he told me to go to law school. And it was very cold in Canada that day, and I like put on my jacket afterward. I remember like throwing my scarf over my shoulder, and the first thing I thought of when I stepped outside his door is, I'm not gonna let a man in a fucking Hollister t-shirt tell me what to do. And you know what? I was like, I'm gonna write that goddamn book. So I think it's like for everybody like who has that book idea in your like head somewhere, just remember there are gonna be a lot of men with Hollister t-shirts. You cannot let them tell you what to do.
That's fine. I'm not into Hollister either.
One final question.
I'm one of the only, presumably 19-year-olds here, and it's quite embarrassing not actually knowing any of the book, but I was invited by my mom. But as I am looking around the room, I also remind myself, this is proof that community exists. This is proof that these people are here for me and my friends and my family and for everyone and each other. And that this isn't much of a question, but it's more of a statement that I am grateful for you to be open about these kids' experiences as well, because we live in a fairly safe kind of state, and a lot of people don't, including a couple of my friends online. So I'm kind of scared about the world that we're living in right now, and I have to remind myself I am not going to be a statistic on the chart, and I am doing this out of spite, pure spite, because I am not going to give it up to that guy in the White House right now. But I just wanted to say thank you for hosting this tonight, because with everything that's been happening in what is the last week of his first week of inauguration, I really needed some really good news, like community, to be here tonight. So I just want to say thank you.
But I think you bring up something really important. And it's something I really try to stress to folks when I have these talks, that, you know, this book was about like centering these kids and their voices, because listening to them is the most important thing, right? It's important that they feel heard. But I feel like often we like let them lead, but then don't help them. We'll look at like Wyatt as an example. Like Wyatt, he's my 15-year-old kid in South Dakota. He's the very first chapter. He came out at 10 years old. He had to like educate his parents who had never heard of the word transgender before. They didn't even know you could be transgender. He had to educate them. He had to like educate his like friends at school. He had to educate teachers. He had to like try to educate his lawmakers to keep them from discriminating against him. They didn't listen, but he tried by going year after year after year to the legislature to try to change policy and affect what was going on, you know, essentially begging to be treated like a human being. It's so much to be put on you at such a young age when it's like you're 10 years old, like you just came out, and it's like now you have to like fight for yourself and for kids that you don't even know all across the state. It's so much work to have to do. And I feel like these kids are doing it on their own a lot of the time. And even if they're not, it feels really lonely, right? Like it feels like there's no one there to help them, that there's no one that really cares. And I think before I wrote this book, I would feel sometimes that no one really cared. Because it's, you know, being a journalist who primarily writes things for online publications, you don't always see the impact, right? You don't always see like the folks that are affected by this or people who your stories really touch. So it just feels like it's like you're telling these stories over and over again and people aren't listening. You know, I felt really stupid in a way because on the day of the election, my sort of like longtime work wife, when like that for a second that looked like Kamala was doing okay, I texted her and I said that it made me feel really happy because it made me feel like we'd made a difference. You know, because I've you know, been doing this work for years. Like this isn't, you know, as Raquel said, this isn't new for me, right? It's just sort of an extension of what I've been doing for a really long time. And I do that work to try to keep people from discriminating against these kids in hopes that, you know, will listen, that will like, you know, to quote Tyra, that will like learn something from this, right? And still, you know, I found out that we didn't. And it's been really hard. I was really depressed for like a month afterward. Because I felt like I'd failed, like, and I didn't know if I could like go back to doing this again. And thank God for Prozac. Prozac's amazing. But I think the thing that I try to really like focus on is that we've got to show up for these kids. And like, who am I to like bow out of the fight now? Like, you know, I've done the work for this long, I've just got to keep fighting. And that's what we've got to do for these kids. We've got to just keep fighting, even when it's hard. We've got to show up for them, because if not, like, that's when it feels lonely. That's when you give into those feelings of isolation, and we know it can happen. So like, for all of us, I think we just have to redouble our efforts to be allies, to be really present in these kids' lives. Like, they've been doing so much of this by themselves for such a long time, and they can't keep doing it. It's just too much. So, you know, we need to do a little bit of it for them. So thank you for being here. And thank you for being you. I don't think you always realize this when you're like 19 years old, but the world needs you, and I hope you remember that.
Thank you for sharing all of your brilliance tonight. Thank y'all for bringing the energy, and make sure you order the book if you don't have it. We need folks to order the book,
Yes.
American Teenager, and you can do that at the front desk. But I know that we have Suhaili here, who is going to close out the program and also tell you about a few more upcoming programs as well.
Can I say one last thing? Writers are really shy about this sort of thing, so I'm trying to sort of like do this to like demystify it a little bit. When we started out doing these events, I was given this advice that generally only like 30% of audience members buy a book, so I should like have really low expectations. And I was like, that's weird. I've never had low expectations in my entire life. Like, I was single for a very long time because I have extremely high expectations. So this is me saying that my high expectation is that everyone will buy a book. Please, it's very important because I'm a small business owner, and this is my small business. It's about like 8 by 12 small business. And we don't have physical books here due to Christmas, snafu, whatever, it's boring. But we will order them for you. We also have a discount, I'm told, 15% discount, which is great. So that's like tax and, I don't know, how much is tax? It's like twice tax, I don't know. So
Too much.
Too much, but also not enough because we need roads. But you get a discount, and it means a lot to me, just because it's been quite a journey doing this book, and just seeing people like take time out of their day to support this project. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to like these, like, I know this is like, sounds like I'm like guilting you or something, but it means a lot to these kids to know that their stories are being heard. So I as their ally, I just want to see like their stories get out in the world. Like, as a writer, you know, selfishly I want everyone to buy my book, but I just want these kids to feel like they're being heard. So like, if I can guilt all of you into buying this book, so that way these kids can feel a little more heard, then I know I'll have done my job. And thank you all for coming.